started out doing film programming perhaps about 5 years ago, and I've done quite a few smaller film programs at SAM, as well as I'm working with Philip Chia in Sweden on the Southeast Asian Film Festival. So this is probably why I was asked to come and share a little bit about that today. But the reason why I'm mentioning SAM so much is because perhaps there's something quite different about working in an institutional context. Because on one hand, if you think about the parent organization that you're under, SAM's main core business, as they like to call it, is visual art. So everybody focuses a lot on exhibitions, which is what you see when you walk through the galleries. So programs like film festivals and film-related, sort of like film programs related to exhibitions are something which are seen as outreach initiatives. So they are there for us to grow new audiences, perhaps bring in some people who are in kind of like the arts and cultural scene, but not necessarily thinking of going to a gallery to look at artwork, but they'll come to our space anyway to watch a film, and then they'll visit the gallery after that. And that is something which has always been given to me as a kind of like framework. So in a sense, I did not start out to program films. This is something that was a wonderful opportunity that was given to me at that time. And I was able to also work a dedicated space within the museum. And this again is quite unusual because oftentimes independent film festivals, you have to scrounge around for venues, find people to sort of like rent out a venue to you at a reasonable rate, because it's all about your business model and so forth. And you also have to work within the confines of that space. So why do you want to do a film program or festival in the first place? So it's quite fruitful to think of yourself as a person who's creating something. You're not just doing it because you have to. So like artists or writers or cooks or musicians and all that, they do something because they have something to say. So the same way, it's very helpful to think of your process of curating a film festival or organizing one as having something statemental to go with, because that is really a very key starting point. If not, you might as well not even do it at all, because everything else has been said, or you just don't have the right kind of passion to go at it. So always try to think about how you can develop your point of view as a film programmer. So as you watch more things and you come across more things, and you actually, if you start programming more things, you see people's responses to it. You see how the media takes it up. You see how people talk about it. You sort of start to realize how it feeds into your own understanding of working with an audience. Okay, so next, you might feel a certain need to respond to a gap that you experience or you see in the kind of film or art landscape around you. One thing that to think about, which is very important, I alluded to it very briefly just now, what is your content? How do you get it? This is really the billion-dollar question. Because if you don't have content, you can't put out festivals. I mean, that sounds really, really obvious, but it's very, very challenging. Because if I think about how I approach my work as a curator, we're often starting from on an empty ground. Like there's so many artists out there in Southeast Asia that people don't know much about, or there's not been a lot of work, and research done upon them. So as a curator, what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to get to know artists, make trips to their country, to their studio, to find out more about their practice, follow their careers, and basically support them by showing their work in the museum. So if you want to be a programmer and make it your career, like all that, that's what you have to do as well. So essentially, when we work with Philip in Sweden, they are the ones who are able to do this, because that is their jobs. They're independents who are out there. They attend film festivals throughout the year. Philip sits on many juries and he's invited as a consultant to many festivals. And he has people who he's built up a long relationship of trust and affection with over the years, and they send him their films, they ask him for feedback. So these are something that you can't get overnight. You have to really work at it, and there's no other way to go about it. And this is what you need to do if you are doing a film festival that shows new and recent works, because otherwise you just won't get it at all. So another way to do it is perhaps if you yourself attend a lot of festivals, like as a ordinary consumer and all that, or you just see a lot of like things that are around SAM. I mean, it's tough to go overseas and get access to these films. You can try looking for them online, or just like attending the programs of your fellow colleagues in the film world. Or you can just watch everything. That's how you start out. Writers start out as good readers. Film programmers start out as good film watchers. So what kind of structure works best for your content? Festival versus program versus series. And I mentioned this just a little while ago, but a festival is something which perhaps is a term or category that is very specific. Sometimes it's used very loosely. It's probably something that is pretty large scale. I mean, the Southeast Asian Film Festival is a small festival because you only have 20 screenings. But of course, you think about SGIFF, that's a really large scale festival. It's got so many components to it. There's like an award section. They even had a red carpet this year. So that's another example of how you have a very large scale festival, which is called that, and it ties up with Screen Singapore and all that. Can you call yourself a festival if you only have 5 films? But it's very good to think carefully about why you want to call something like that, because it has an effect and an impact on how you market it and how you talk about it to people who can help you. Okay, so sometimes it's better to call something a program or do something that way. The disadvantage of that is that you don't get the momentum that a festival gives you. So if you do a film festival, oftentimes you can have very clear markers to indicate time passing. You have an opening and a closing, and maybe it takes place over like a week or something. So there's a certain kind of buzz that you can achieve, and it's likely that the media will pick it up a lot more because of the scale of it and so forth. So it's a calculated kind of movement. Okay, so as I mentioned just now, it's a visual culture and contemporary art space. Film programs are not our core business. We are not necessarily an art center like, let's say, Esplanade's Performing Arts Center, the Bangkok Arts and Culture Center is an art center. So it's not always focused on events, which is a very different kind of mindset that you have for, let's say, a 3-month, 6-month long exhibition. So, however, because we are a contemporary art museum, it incorporates the whole notion of visual culture, which incorporates like moving image, as well. So this is how we can explain and justify to our stakeholders as well as our audiences why we are doing this. So the reason why I mentioned this is because I think it's very important for us, and maybe for any of us who are coming up with some things, like why do you want to do this in the first place? How does it add to what you are already involved with? How does it expand the field of discourse? How does it contribute towards people's understanding or experience of this particular medium? So this framework will have a kind of impact on what you program and what you do. So we always think about what kind of functioning is fulfilled with your festival program. These are some of the programs that we have done. Okay, so first is artist films. Now this was the most obviously related one because it's called artist films and basically films by artists. Okay. So it just like explains what it is itself. But at the time, like we had a really nice blurb, that was written like this to sort of explain why we had it. So it says, it's a series of exceptional film and video works by artists that explore the relationship between art and the moving image, and which promote dialogue and exchange on contemporary practices in visual culture. So this, I have no problem explaining to my bosses or whoever that why I'm doing this, because it's an art museum, we show films for artists. So just to give an example of some of them, these are booklets that I've done. Ai Weiwei, here, Yang Fuk-dong, Gillian Waring, British artist, Isaac Julian, Banksy, Shirin Nashad, Amar Kanwar, and Steve McQueen. Okay, we did a few other films, but basically at the time I was running this thing by myself, so I didn't have the time to do everything. So very early on, the early days, we made our own tickets before we had this thing. I remember we bought the pizza cutter so we could do the preparations. Okay, so you believe incredible we're art museum, a national museum, this kind of thing, right? But we did it. And why we had this brochure, right, is that it was very important to us to really make this something that people value as a moment to find out more about artists and to make it an event. So we designed all these little pamphlets, and then we had like a couple of, we started out with 2, but later it was like 1 essay about the work, and it usually contextualized the film in relation to an artist's practice. And then just some additional information. And the reason why this was important was because we were very clear from the start when we did this program that we wanted to show works by artists who are really practitioners in the moving image. They want to show any random like person. I mean, everybody's not really a practitioner of moving image. That's why you have to like justify it extra hard. Okay, but this is a documentary that he made himself. So if we wanted to show how artists can push this medium to its boundaries and really make it an accessible way for the audience members to find out more about this artist. That's why these essays always contextualized that particular film that he or she had made in relation to other works that they have made before and perhaps shown in galleries or museums and so forth. How many artists are there out there who are making single channel works which you actually pay $10 and go sit down and watch? Okay? So I mean, this is again like it's a way I was thinking about it as a program and not being necessarily as an exhibition curator anymore. Because at the time we were responding to a need, just to go back to my framework that I was saying before. I noticed a lot of people like Steve McQueen, he did Hunger, he did Shame. I mean, these are all works that he went into the feature film industry before when he was making a lot of like video works that were shown in galleries. And even Shirin Nesha, this was her first feature film, Women Without Men. And there were many others. So it was like kind of like a trend. So even like Gillian Waring, she also made this documentary called Self-Made. So we were responding to this very noticeable effect of artists making feature films, and we decided to screen them. But after a while, because a feature film is so expensive and it needs so much support to make, that there are not that many artists who are doing this anymore. So I ran to the problem, I was like, okay, who am I going to show next? And if I show someone next, right, maybe it won't be what people expect, a film to be. It might be something that's maybe 60 minutes long. It might be something more experimental. It might be a set of short films. And would someone pay $10 to watch it? Okay, I mean, it sounds like a very boring question, but it's a very important question to ask. So after a while, that wasn't why this program stopped. It stopped because the priorities of Sam changed a little bit. But nonetheless, it's something which I think was an important kind of moment to have, perhaps in Singapore's festival history. And it can come up again and in perhaps a different way. Our Southeast Asian Film Festival is a little bit strange. It goes over one whole month. Now the history behind this is, okay, it just kind of happened, okay, because back then we had that venue and it was confirmed very early on that we would work with Philip Chia and Teo Swee for this. And if you know a little bit about them, you know that they're absolute veterans in the scene and they have so many contacts and so much experience working in Southeast Asian directors and the film team over the years. So we invited them at first to just test out the relationship, and then we did a very small program that was related to the Singapore Biennale exhibition that was kind of done in conjunction with that. So that was called Negotiating Home History Nation in 2011. And it was obviously a Southeast Asian focused kind of exhibition. So we selected some films, and back then it wasn't very conscious. We weren't very conscious about when the film was made. It was just something that fit in with the theme of the artworks in the show. And after that, we kind of continued on by having a so-called very new film section in which we screened works that we made that year or the year before. And then it just spread over 1 month because we wanted people to just keep coming back throughout the duration of the exhibition. So that's how it was this funny little accident just happened. So now our festival goes on for 4 weekends and a total of 20 screenings. When Philip and I started working together back then, because he has been so involved in this over the years, right? And the scale that he works on is entirely different. Okay? So nobody's going to think of a film festival the same way they think of as an exhibition. If you come to my exhibition at SAM, you walk through the whole thing. Okay, maybe if you are very dedicated, you'll take 45 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours. If not, you just take 5 minutes. But you see almost every single work. But what kind of person would see every single film? Okay, it's probably the programmer or the technician or the censor. Okay, so these are the only people, and they're your perfect viewers. And the reason why I say this is because when I approach the Southeast Asian Film Festival, I always think of it as a whole. How do these films play off against each other? Are there certain themes that are running through? Are there too many boring films? Are there too what does it say that I've got 3 films that date children and then these are very trivial things, but it's something which you use to structure what your lineup is. But if you have a very large scale festival like the SGIFF, for instance, that was done this year, there's so many components. Nobody's going to go and watch everything, and they won't even think about your festival that way. They'll just go look at your booklet, they'll flip through, and they'll say, oh, I like 5 films, they sound interesting, or maybe 2 directors are nice, and they'll just buy the ticket. the tickets for that. They won't even think about like the holistic thing, and it's not something that even crosses their mind. So that is one way of doing it. But at the Southeast Asian Film Festival, the approach is a little bit different because it's so compact film festival. We do try in our own way to make it something which is a sensible whole. So it has integrity as a program overall. And of course we wish that you could experience it as we have and watch everything, you know, like us. And I know that some people here sometimes buy a lot of tickets for almost everything, and it's a rewarding kind of a moment. But it's something which I think is interesting to bear in mind too, because it can stumble you. You can get too hung up on the holistic approach that you think you should have, but you actually don't really need it. On the other hand, you can't throw it away either, because no matter what, you need to come up with something that has structural integrity and strength. But it's just a way of approaching. Okay, so how to be relevant, immediate, and real. These are, I don't know, this is something which I don't think I've even very fully resolved in my mind as well. Sometimes when I look at some film lineups, you know, like in the papers or whatever, I always think to myself, like, why is this like institutional, this person showing a film now? Like, I don't understand why this film is being shown now. So it's something which, it's a terrible question to ask, but it's necessary to ask yourself that, because sometimes when people look at your film lineup, you know, like, there has to be, I think for it to be successful and compelling and important, you have to know why this film is being made and shown now. If let's say I randomly show something because I think it's interesting and I put it down there, there's no clear rationale, it's not so helpful for, let's say, your development as an audience member, your development as a film programmer. So it's a very important thing to ask yourself. And perhaps it ties in with what the nature of the contemporary is. There's always something which is pressing, you know, and it's very valuable for all of us, you know, to just pay attention to what is being spoken of in this world now. And then how can you ensure longevity? It's helpful to think about your program as continuing for as long as it can. So always try to do something new. It's tough, it really is. And try to really make an impact, or maybe like like something that people can follow through and feel as if they're getting something different every kind of year. And of course, the dream that everybody has is that they can spot the next big thing. I mean, like Philip Chia, for many years, he was, I mean, when SIFF was started back then, many of the most, the forefront, you know, directors at the forefront, or the most well-known directors now who are in their mid-career phase, were shown by SIFF many years ago. And how did that happen? You know, like, it's very ineffable. You can't be a person who just like happens upon this. You know, it's something that you have to make a life out of, or you have to have some kind of like factor. I mean, I'm not saying this that, you know, to sort of be pessimistic about it, but it's just, you know, that's just how it happens. The last thing is very important for us, making friends, building communities, because essentially what has been nice about our festival over the years is that its size and its focus has really let us really develop networks amongst people who are our peers, our contemporaries, people who are emerging, people who are senior to us. It's really a space for these like art and film friendships to form, because it allows people to feel committed to something, and that's what perhaps gives a lot of longevity to any kind of program. When you feel that people are committed to it, whether or not you're an audience member, you're an insider, or whether you're the person who's organizing. If you do something like passionately, right, in a way, or you really care about your content, you know your content, I think people will recognize it, because anything that is thoughtfully put together, you know, like, people will somehow recognize it, even if it's something that's totally new for them. So I think that this is something which is a natural byproduct of commitment to something, and I think it's just something that we're very grateful to have happened over the years with our film programming at SAM. Okay, so this is the very last thoughts I have. Okay, watch everything. This is okay. This is something I never thought I had to say until I started working with some students. People actually suggest films without having watched it, you know. And I mean, that sounds like incredible, but you have to watch the film before you put it down. It's critical. Okay, but that's a very obvious thing, but yes, please watch everything.